Welcome in to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports on this fine Friday evening in Houston, Texas, joined by my frequent co-host on the Raw Prospect podcast and also here on the Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports show, or the Dit Hole show as we like to call it, Emmy Nixon, who's got his Texas gear on, repping it for the start of the tour that we've all been waiting for, Texas's last run ever through the Big 12, and the last times that they are going to play most of these teams for the foreseeable future, with the exception of Oklahoma, comes and starts tomorrow when they go to Waco and they look to defeat what's been a not-so-great Baylor Bears team so far this season. Welcome, Emmy. How are you feeling tonight on the eve of one of the most loaded college football Saturdays that we've had in the past decade?
I'm feeling great, man. I watched a bit of baseball today. Was watching the Rangers take on the Mariners. That was a banger of a game. I think it's still not done yet. It's actually in the ninth inning at the moment, but I'm feeling great. I mean, sports are just loaded at the moment. NFL, college football, MLB running into the playoffs. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, we get the Ryder Cup next weekend as well. We just did an episode where we did our Ryder Cup draft. Go back and watch that, even though the title is College Football Week 3 Buy or Sell, which we recorded on Monday. But yeah, and sort of this new regime, or at least short regime, of the Raw Prospect podcast, where everything has been live the past week and a half. Go check that out. You can find us on YouTube, pretty much any social media. Go check out our YouTube shorts as well. There'll probably be something from Dit Hole on those YouTube shorts as well. We got 7 games that we're going to get into today. I think at least 6 of which include ranked teams, 5 of which are ranked teams versus ranked teams, and then the other 2 are just a ranked team against a non-ranked team, but will still probably be pretty good games. It's loaded. The games are spread out throughout the day. We've got like a couple of big games at 11, 3 big games in the 2:30 window, so you'll be flipping back and forth, and then another 3 big games in the night window. So, I mean, just pick your poison here, man. It's going to be, some are calling it Separation Saturday. Will we see potentially the separation of the elite teams from possibly the very good teams, as a lot of these teams are getting their quote-unquote very first big tests tomorrow? So we will see about that. We're going to jump straight into this thing, though. I'm actually, when we get to the Texas game, going to give you some very interesting numbers as it pertains to Quinn Ewers this year, and as it relates to him, comparing him to the other quarterbacks that we consider, in the Heisman Trophy race. So that Texas game will need a little bit more time to get into those numbers. But we're going to start at the very, very, very beginning of tomorrow, and what's just an absolutely loaded Saturday. Florida State, who got tested unexpectedly last week at Boston College after they just destroyed LSU in that second half, ranked number 4 in the country, -2 at the Clemson Tigers, who are sort of in what I like to call wounded animal mode. They already have a loss this year. It is a conference loss. So if they lose this game, they are not mathematically out of it, but they are basically out of it unless complete chaos ensues for not only possibly the conference championship game, because they would have losses to Duke and Florida State, who are the other top teams in their conference, but the college football playoff as well. So it's a very important game for Clemson. They don't lose at home a very lot, which I think plays into this line that Vegas has set. Florida State only -2. So what are you thinking here? What do you want to see tomorrow out of this game? What are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking at the health of Jordan Travis. Do you know his status when it comes to this game? I think he's going to be playing, but um, I want to see how big that injury was against Boston College, and two, I just think Clemson is going to have their hands full when it comes to limiting this Florida State receiving core. We saw just absolutely crush LSU's defense in week one. So I'm expecting Florida State and go out and show how good of a team they really are. Clemson is gonna have that crowd behind them early, but I think that crowd's going to be silent by third quarter, because the better team is just going to show itself. They don't have the overwhelming amount of talent that they've had in years past, that they've had for these big ACC matchups. So I just think Jordan Travis has played on big stages before and played well. I think this is going to be another coming out party for this Florida State receiving core and that amazing pass rusher that they have. I'm forgetting his name, but he's the consensus best defensive player in this upcoming draft as well.
Yeah, Jared Verse is the edge rusher you would be talking about. This is, as Josh Pate put it, the referendum game that people have been talking about. It is a difference in roster acquisition philosophy, as we all know and have spoken about. Clemson's resistancy, in particular Dabo, his opposition towards using the transfer portal and his resources at his disposal as it pertains to NIL to go out and acquire more talent and to fill holes in this roster. Whereas Mike Norvell has potentially built a roster, not quite to the extent that Dion has, but he's got a lot of these elite guys that you've seen make early impacts for this Florida State team. Jared Verse, Keon Coleman, the list goes on and on. He's gone out and acquired those through the transfer portal, along with, I guess, Florida State's recruiting starting to pick up steam as they rise back to a level of national prominence on a national, potentially a national championship contending scale. For me, in this game, for Clemson, what is the path? Because I think I'm still favoring Florida State to win. But for Clemson, you wonder what is the path for them to get a victory. I think it's still very well possible they could do that. They don't lose at home a lot. They're still the Clemson Tigers. I haven't completely swept them aside yet. My only real problem with this team is it just seems like a lot of offenses that I can think of right now in the NFL that have struggled to create explosive plays. This offense they have a hard time creating those explosive plays. Big plays create easy points. And I just feel like Clemson, maybe tomorrow's the game that everything goes according to plan and they're able to do that. And we saw Florida State come out and not look so great last week. They very well could have lost that game to what's, I don't think, a very good Boston College team. It was penalties and some mistakes late that kept Boston College from potentially winning that football game. And if Boston College had won that football game, I'm not sure that we're leading off the show with this particular game. But I just think the numbers would tell you that Clemson has struggled to create those explosive plays. And if you're not able to do that, you're going to have to be very methodical in your approach offensively against a very talented Florida State defense. And I just don't know that you can beat this Florida State defense, which has a ton of athletes up front that I think matches up very well with this Clemson offensive line and can create pressure on Cade Klubnik early and often. I'm just not sure if you're going to be able to go on 10, 12, 15 play drives consistently and win this football game with the firepower that Florida State has on the other side. They have 4 gains of 30-plus yards this year. That's 103rd in FBS. And Cade Klubnik is averaging a shockingly low 9.8 yards per completion. This offense just doesn't seem to have very much explosiveness. I think if you're Clemson defensively, you want to stop the Trey Benson running game, the 3-headed monster that Florida State has at the running back position with Trey Benson, Lawrence Toafili, and Rodney Hill. You want to stop that. But problem is, if you do that, well, they have Johnny Wilson, they have Keon Coleman, they have Jaheim Bell, who are averaging all over 10 yards per reception. So I just think Florida State's a little more dynamic. I like their athletes up front better. I like them on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I give Clemson a chance, and I hope they're in this game for college football fans and for viewing sake. I think they can make this a game, muck it up a little bit. But I do have Florida State winning in the end, and I think I have them winning by more than 2 points. So I'm going to take Florida State to win and cover. But I'm not like 100% confident in that, I wouldn't say. As it pertains to prize picks, though, did you have any prize picks you were looking into for this particular game?
I was looking at possibly Jordan Travis over on passing touchdowns. He's set at 2.5 at the moment. I think, or excuse me, pass plus rushing touchdowns on the line there. I think they're going to have to rely on him a bit in the red zone. That's going to be where I think this game is going to be decided. You're going to see some jump balls to Keon Coleman, most likely. Other than that, I didn't have anything else.
Yeah, I would look at Keon Coleman, 0.5 receiving touchdowns. I think that could be a pretty easy bet to hit. He's been a touchdown scoring machine this year. And then you look at, of course, passing touchdowns. I don't see Jordan Travis on there, unfortunately. But I like either Johnny Wilson or Keon Coleman at over half a touchdown receiving. I'm probably going to stay away from passing yards in this game. I just don't know what to expect there.
Yeah,
I wanted to see if Trey Benson has a rushing yards total. He does. 59.5 rush yards over under for Trey Benson. I would lean over there. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to actually make that bet, but if you were to look into bets from my perspective for this game, I would look at that. And then you have on the other side Will Shipley at 70.5 rush yards. I'd probably stay away from that, but he is a vocal point of Clemson's offense. So if you wanted to make it, I wouldn't argue with you there. I'm probably going to stay away from this game, though. I might go with those receiver bets that I was talking about, but I'm probably just going to stay away from this game and put my money elsewhere as it pertains to prize picks.
Yeah,
So,
I think I'm going to do the same. I think it's going to be a little bit unpredictable in terms of game script. I think for a game like last night, say, in Thursday Night Football, you kind of knew that the Giants were going to have to throw the football a lot so you could manage your picks based on that. But for a game like this, where the crowd is going to be involved, and you could easily see it being, a game where it's above 28 points or even below 20 points. So there's a variety of different things that could happen here. So not a great game to bet on.
Absolutely. Are you taking Florida State to win and cover?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Florida State by a touchdown.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll move into the 2:30 window. This is the good old 2:30 game, SEC on CBS, which sadly is going away here pretty soon as the Big Ten will take over completely CBS, I believe, next year. But you will have the SEC on CBS this weekend. Number 15, Ole Miss, and former assistant Lane Kiffin going down to Tuscaloosa after what was an ugly game last week in Tampa for Alabama to face Nick Saban in Alabama. -6.5. This was actually a touchdown spread earlier in the week. I guess it's gone down a little bit since then. Jalen Milroe will be back at starting quarterback for the Crimson Tide as they look to right things offensively. That's one of the bigger stories in college football right now. I mean, there's Deion in Colorado, and then there's what Alabama's doing in their struggles. First time they're out of the AP top 10 since 2015. First week they're out of the AP top 10 since 2015. I think that was the last year that they lost to Ole Miss. So what are you looking for in this game? Obviously, there's the quarterback questions for Alabama, but outside of that, I mean, is there anything that you're particularly watching for, and who are you picking?
I look at this Ole Miss offense and the tempo that they play at. My question would be, how will Alabama's defensive line stay fresh? How are they going to react to that pace of play? And then, two, that quick passing game with Ole Miss. They like to throw a lot of screens and work that short passing as a extension of their run game. And I think eventually that's going to put pressure on these Alabama safeties to come down and make tackles. And we saw in the Texas game, once they start becoming a little bit more aggressive, you can hit that shot over the top. So whether or not Ole Miss hits those big plays over the top of the Alabama defense, I think is going to be the difference in this game. I see it being really close, and I think now that Alabama is set in stone and trusting Jalen Milroe as the guy for the rest of the season, presumably, I think they're going to structure the game plan differently to where he's playing into his skill set. His two best strengths, the deep ball and running the football. I think they can, make this offense into a high-powered unit with his rushing ability and leverage that. I really do. So I'm not sure who I'm going to pick just yet. I'm going to wait on that until after I hear you, but I'm so excited for this game. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup.
And it's one that if you're a Texas fan, you have to have your eye on this game. Because if Bama exits September with 2 losses and they lose this game, and Ole Miss goes into Tuscaloosa and wins, and now you have Bama as a team that could potentially be looking at 3 or 4 losses this year, it doesn't bode at that win won't look as good at the end of the year. And in a Big 12, that so far, I mean, it's still relatively too early to tell anything, but that so far looks relatively weak as it compares to the Pac-12, the SEC, and the Big Ten. You want this Bama win. You want this Bama team to look the part here the next couple of weeks as they enter SEC play. And Ole Miss is not going to be an easy test for them. More so than the quarterback play, which is obviously an issue. But I think they're going to get back to doing what they should have probably went to against Texas, and that's an offensive game plan centered around what Jalen Milroe does best. I think they're going to get back to running the football downhill, which they did do a pretty good job of last week and early on that Texas game. They just went away from it.
Yeah.
And I think these Bama receivers are good enough, such as Jermaine Burton, to make some plays. And I think we'll see a better version of Jalen Milroe than we saw against Texas. Here's the thing, though. This offensive line, which people raved about coming into this season, has not been good this year. I mean, there's no way around it. They are currently 130th, almost last in FBS in sacks allowed per dropback. And they're 118th in pressure rates allowed. This Ole Miss defensive line, although you can say the level of competition hasn't necessarily been the strongest, but they do have 10 sacks so far this year. So I look at that as a potential matchup that I'll be watching. The Ole Miss front, I mean, these are SEC athletes we're talking about against the Bama offensive line, which has struggled so far this year. That will certainly be a factor, especially in the passing game. We saw the Texas edge rushers and this defensive line basically manhandle this Bama offensive line, especially when it came to pass protection 2 weeks ago. We need to see a better Bama offensive line in pass protection if Alabama wants to get this offense going. Because if you give Jalen Milroe some time, along with what he can do with his legs, I think he's got the arm and the talent to get the ball where it needs to go. Just under duress, it makes it a little tougher. Sometimes you speed up the mind of a young quarterback, and he's going to make some mistakes, especially when you don't have the most dynamic receivers in the world. I think they have really good receivers, but I'm not sure they have the level of receivers that can elevate Jalen Milroe. Like some of these other teams, I think potentially have receivers that think elevate their quarterback's play a little bit, even though those teams have great quarterbacks. As it pertains to Ole Miss, they're the total opposite of Clemson offensively. They have exploded all over the place. 12 plays of 30 or more yards already this year. That's 8th in college football. Jackson Dart is basically doubled Cade Klubnik in yards per completion at almost 19. So he's over doubled Cade Klubnik in yards per completion. And he can also run a little bit as well, sort of like a dual threat. Now, Ole Miss's offensive line, while it's been better than Bama's so far this year, isn't great either. That's why you see them throw the ball and get the ball out quickly a lot of the time. And that's what Lane Kiffin historically likes to do. But they're not great either. So I think whichever defensive line can get more pressure on the other team's quarterback will really bode well for this game. But we've seen many times where this Alabama dynasty has come under some type of adversity, maybe not to this level, where they're potentially facing elimination from contention of the college football playoff in September. But they faced adversity before, and I think they're going to respond. I think Ole Miss keeps this a game for 2.5, 3 quarters, but I think Alabama wins by about a touchdown, maybe 10 points. I just don't see them losing 2 in a row at home. I think Jace McClellan gets going on the ground. I think Roydell Williams gets going on the ground. I think you'll see Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver transfer from Georgia, make a couple big plays through the air. And I think Jalen Milroe will really be a difference with what he's going to be able to do with his legs tomorrow if Tommy Rees lets him do that, which is another big factor.
Right.
You got to let Jalen Milroe do what he does best. And if you do that, he'll gain confidence. He'll slowly gain confidence, and you can start to branch out from there. I think Ole Miss is a really good team. I mean, they're nothing to scoff at. If you're Alabama, you definitely want to bring your A game. I think if you're anything less than that, Ole Miss can beat you. But overall, top to bottom, you have the more talented roster. And if you just let Jalen Milroe do what he's best at, this offensive line doesn't look terrible, and you run the football, then they should win this game, and they should win it pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to pick Alabama as well. The one thing that I'm having hesitation about is their problems with penalties. We saw in the Texas game, they shot themselves in the foot consistently. And when you get behind the chains with a inexperienced quarterback like Jalen Milroe, even if like it doesn't matter if you're playing at home, on the road, any team you're playing against, whatever situation, that's just not a recipe you want to have. Um, they're going to have to clean up the penalties. I see Alabama winning in a little bit of a closer game. I have them winning by 3 or 4 points here.
Fair enough. Any prize picks that you had your eye on for this episode or for this game or not?
Jalen Milroe rushing yards. I think that's the one I point to right away, just because I feel like this will be a game where Alabama embraces those strengths that he has, and they're going to have to.
Yeah, right now, Jalen Milroe set 46.5 rushing yards. But a lot of the time when he gets out of the pocket and runs, he has the ability to create those 46 yards in one play.
Okay.
So I like that. I also like Jason McClellan at 60.5 rush yards. I'm not sure I'll actually place that bet, but I think Bama will have a good day on the ground, and it'll bode well for their offense, both with Jalen Milroe and Jason McClellan. There's also a Jackson Dart 42.5 rush yards bet that you could make. I'd stay away from that. Haven't really looked
Yeah.
into anything else. I'd stay away from Jalen Milroe passing yards. I'd stay away from Jackson Dart passing yards, or anything else in this game. Maybe you look at fantasy scores. So I don't know, but I'll make a bet or two in this game just because it's a game that I'm going to be invested in. I just don't know which ones, but those are the ones that I had my eye on as well. But with that, let's move on as we still have a good amount of games to get to here. This is a game that a lot of people will be watching, diehards and casuals at that. Number 19, Colorado. You could say this is their first big test. I mean, they got TCU week 1. That was a pretty big statement. They got a good defense in Nebraska that challenged them for a little bit. They got Colorado State's best last week up until overtime. But now they really get one of the elite teams in their own conference as they enter conference play. And that's at number 10, Oregon, Dan Lanning and his squad with Bo Nix and all the talent that they have with their spicy uniforms. I don't know which one they'll be wearing tomorrow. But in Eugene, Oregon, Colorado's first big test, ranked on ranked matchup. I don't think that either College Game Day nor Big Noon Kickoff will be at this game because they've already been to a bunch of Colorado games and they're going to be elsewhere. They're actually going to be in South Bend for Notre Dame. But this will still be a game that a lot of people have their eye on. It's a big spread. It's Oregon favored by 3 touchdowns. We've already seen Colorado overcome a spread like this year when they were 21-point underdogs to TCU in week 1. I'm not saying that's going to happen this week, but we've seen Colorado overcome stuff like this. What are you looking for? I mean, I'm sure there are a bunch of prize picks that we could probably look into for this game.
Yeah, I don't see the line being like too realistic to me. I think this game will be closer than 3 touchdowns. I still see Oregon winning this game. I still see Oregon as the better team. I think Bo Nix is going to go out and show out. I think I mean, this is by far the best offense that Colorado has played. I think that defense is going to have a big test in terms of just tackling in space and just handling the speed that Oregon has and always has, seems to have. Um, and then Colorado's offensive line is the other thing. Um, they've been, so far this year. They've given up a little bit of pressure. Um, I think about 3 or 4 sacks each game. It feels like um, this Oregon defense, I think, is going to have their way with that Colorado offensive line, and not just in rushing against Shedeur Sanders, but also in stopping the run as well.
Yeah, now one thing, I mean, I guess Oregon's been tested. They went to Lubbock a couple weeks ago and pulled out an uglier win there. They get this game at home. I think they're going to win this game. Of course, Dion and Shedeur Sanders going to bring the attention to this game. It's the 2:30 game on ABC right after the Clemson game against Florida State. I think Bo Nix will have a big game. I think this Oregon offense will have a big game against this Colorado defense. They're going to spread them out. They're going to play fast. And, I think Colorado has a defensive front that, while it's been more impressive than I thought it would be coming into this year, could be pretty easy to overwhelm against one of the better offensive lines there is in college football. I mean, Oregon, they've got NFL players on this offensive line, like they always do. I just think it's a talent mismatch on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think, considering that Shedeur Sanders, with how great he has been so far, and he's been absolutely fantastic, he's taken hits on 55 of his dropbacks so far this year. 55 dropbacks he has been hit. That's easily the most in all of college football. I mean, easily takes the cake. He's going to have to do something magical, I think, in this game for Colorado to win. I think Oregon's got a pretty good run defense. I think they'll be pretty stout up front, hard to run against. Although I really like Dylan Edwards, the running back for Colorado. I just don't see Colorado having very much success running the football unless they're able to get their passing game going early. Then they could potentially run off the pass. I just don't see Colorado being able to establish much of a run game otherwise. And therefore, Sanders, which to his credit, he's done so far this year, is going to need to put Colorado on his back, so to speak, and have a huge performance that will, I think, probably vault him to the top of the Heisman leaderboards for now, if he does it and he wins this game in Eugene, until next week when he goes, head to head with Caleb Williams. I mean, Oregon's going to be getting back their running back, Alton McCaskill, who was a transfer in from Houston, who was a 1,000-yard rusher. So that just adds another dimension to this Oregon offense that's going to be hard to stop. And Travis Hunter's out, unfortunately. So the Buffs are 3-0. They've been incredible. But I think getting to 4-0 this week is going to require something pretty miraculous. I don't think enough people are talking about how good this Oregon team is, but maybe they're going to find out tomorrow. I think Bo Nix, he's a totally different player. He's been a totally different player at Oregon than he was at Auburn. It's two totally different players. So one of the better quarterback prospects in next year's draft, along with maybe Shedeur Sanders. I think this will be a game. But I think I see Oregon winning by 10 to 14 points, maybe not 21. But I see them winning by 2 possessions. Just think they're the better team. It's nothing against Colorado. You've already done really well, and I think there are more wins on this schedule for Colorado, no doubt. I just don't see it this week.
Yeah, Colorado before the season, I mean, with the start they've had, it was probably the best case scenario, obviously, with that win against TCU. But um, even with even if you did assume it was best case scenario to start out, by the time you hit week 4, week 5, the injuries start piling up, and I think with the dynamic with this team. I just don't think they have the depth quite yet. And how could you? I mean, with how many transfers they had to bring in, and Dion hasn't even had a real recruiting class quite yet with this team. So um, this was never the year where they would be competing in the Pac-12. Um, I think Shador Sanders will play great, and I think we'll keep them in this game. We could see this total score being above 100 points if Shador plays how I think he can play.
Yeah, we could. It might be. I mean, this Colorado offense could shock this Oregon defense a little bit, just because they haven't seen an offense quite like this yet. I mean, Colorado's been one of the better offenses so far in college football. And I mean, they haven't played trash. I mean, I don't think TCU's trash by any means. They had a bad game defensively in that particular game, but they're not a trash defense. Nebraska's a really good defense. They put up 30-plus points on that defense. Their offense is a different story at Nebraska, but regardless, that defense is pretty good. And then last week, Colorado State brought their A game on both sides of the ball. And Shador Sanders, basically, I mean, 2 minutes left in the game, 98 yards, tie the game up. It was pretty impressive. Pretty damn impressive.
Yep.
He's going to need to do similar things, though, tomorrow to win. And maybe, just maybe, if this is truly the season of chaos that I think it might be in college football, maybe Colorado wins this game somehow. I mean, one thing that Josh Pate mentioned on his prediction show earlier this week on Tuesday, Oregon has yet to turn the ball over this year. So maybe the recipe for Colorado is somehow create 1 or 2 turnovers, get an extra possession for yourself, create a short field, make it a little easier on that offense.
Yeah, get a lead early.
And get a lead early. That's another thing that you'll want to do. Take the crowd out of it somehow. That would certainly bring more eyes to this game if, say, Colorado jumps out to like a 10-3 lead and it's middle of the second quarter. I think a lot of people would start to kind of change the channel if they're watching elsewhere.
Yeah.
Start flipping back and forth. So,
this game it's a main event. There's no question about it.
Any prize picks that you were looking at for this particular matchup?
Xavier Weaver was one I looked at without Travis Hunter in there. I think choosing between whether you want to bet him on receiving touchdowns or receiving yards, I think I'd probably lean the touchdowns side of things. But I mean, his talent, man, it's ridiculous. I think he's underrated. He's one of the underrated receivers on this Colorado team. I think this might be a big game for him with how many targets he'll get.
Absolutely. I look at Shador Sanders, 2.5 pass plus rush plus receiving touchdowns. I'd probably take the over on that. Oregon's got a good defense, but I think Colorado will still score points in this game, and Shador Sanders is going to be part of that. Whether he throws the touchdown, runs the touchdown, or even maybe catches a touchdown, he's going to – I look at to take the over on that. And then Xavier Weaver, of course, but Travis Hunter being out, him really being the vocal point in that offense late in last week's game against Colorado State. Once Travis Hunter unfortunately left that game, Travis Hunter, the giraffe costume man, I guess you could call him. Those would be bets I'd look at. Maybe if you think Bo Nix is going to have like a Heisman type game in this matchup, the 3.5 pass plus rush touchdowns over under could be interesting. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably stay away from passing yards. Maybe take the over on Bo Nix 315. I might consider that actually, but otherwise, I'd probably stay away from
Yeah.
that.
Do you know the backstory behind the giraffe suit? I don't.
I don't know. I believe it was a draft onesie to be specific.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
I don't know exactly what the backstory is behind that, but if you haven't seen in an interview earlier this week where Travis Hunter was talking to, I think, some form of media about his injury and about this upcoming game, which he won't be playing in, but it's a big game. It is actually a lacerated spleen for him, by the way, which ain't good. But he'll be out a couple weeks and he'll be back. He was wearing a giraffe onesie. I don't know why, but
so
it was
random.
pretty funny.
So random.
It made me like Travis Hunter all that much more after watching that.
I hope there's a reason behind it. Like maybe like he like went to like a children's hospital and one of the kids he talks to likes giraffes or something. I don't know. It's just so
I'm
random to me.
sure.
I don't,
I'm sure there's a reason behind it. Maybe Dion told him to wear it. I don't know. Maybe him and Shador Sanders have something where like Travis Hunter's a giraffe and Shador Sanders is like a elephant or something. I don't know. But yeah, we're getting off topic.
yeah,
Okay.
we're getting off the rails here. My bad. Yeah, let's go
This
to
is
the
like
next
saying
game before we do anything
this is a
crazy.
ranked matchup, and I don't think people are giving this game enough credit for what it could be. We haven't talked about UCLA much this year, and Chip Kelly, number 22, UCLA with a true freshman quarterback, and Dante Moore, who I'm really excited to watch, going up against a Utah team that finally might be getting back its quarterback in Cam Rising, which I think could potentially make for one of the better games of the season. Is there anything in particular that you want to talk about or look for in this game before we talk
I
about
want to
prize?
talk about UCLA's edge rusher that's just been on a tear to start the year. Has a great name, also probably right up there with Kool Aid McKinstry in terms of top names in college football. Leilatu Latu has just been he's been tearing it up, and just with his physical tools, I mean, it's right up there with a guy like Tyree Wilson, who we saw go top 10 last year. I mean, this dude is legit, and he could wreck this game if Utah is not careful here.
Yeah, rumor has it that Cam Rising will be making his return from the
Yep.
torn ACL in last year's Rose Bowl. That's exciting. Um, you know, uh, their backups did a lot of work just keeping this team afloat. While Cam Rising was out for the first 3 weeks, Nate Johnson did a pretty good job in their big late victory over Baylor a couple weeks ago in Waco. But getting Rising back is a welcome addition to this offense. They haven't been all that great so far, and for good reason. I mean, they've been playing with backups, but they're just 84th in points per possession so far this year. They also might get back their star tight end, Brant Kuthi, I think is how you say it. I could be saying that wrong. Probably am. But really talented tight end. He's also coming back from a knee injury. So Utah is getting a good portion of their production offensively back in this game. But I think this UCLA team's dangerous. You mentioned the pass rusher. And Dante Moore, man, if you haven't watched him yet, one of the better young quarterbacks that I've seen in college football in a while. Highly recruited, obviously. he hasn't faced a stiff test like this in Utah in their defense on the road in a hostile environment yet. But he's 10th in total QBR so far, behind the guys that you think of. I mean, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix. I mean, the top of the top.
Yeah.
Obviously, Shedeur Sanders is up there as well. Bo Nix. The list goes on and on. I think Quinn Ewers is up there, I believe. But, I mean, I really like him. Last week against a pretty good San Diego State defense, he was 17 for 27, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Problem is, Utah has allowed a total of 31 points in their first 3 games, and they forced 3 and outs on 44% of their team's possessions. So the key for UCLA is going to be staying on schedule, not getting behind the chains, not having 3rd and longs, getting into 3rd and manageable, and letting Dante Moore do what he does best. They're going to have to run the ball effectively, of course. And I want to see how their offensive line responds to the physicality of this Utah defensive front. And then for Utah, you're getting a good portion of your production back offensively. It's a pretty good UCLA defense you're going against. I want to see how Cam Rising looks. And then I want to see how they run the football. I think this could be which team potentially runs the football better, and who creates more pressure on the opposing quarterback. I'm actually leaning UCLA right now. I just have a gut feeling that UCLA is going to surprise some people. I don't know that I'm picking them to win outright, but I'm kind of. I mean, I'm not really sure. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think this game is interesting from a betting perspective. Obviously, outside of Texas, because Texas is a little bit behind in terms of legalizing that. But if you're not in Texas, this is a money line this is a spread line that I would consider betting on. And you mentioned UCLA's freshman quarterback. I mean, for some reason, Chip Kelly's just got a thing for freshman quarterbacks, I guess. I mean, he had DTR start all 4 years as starting out as a true freshman. I think there's something to it.
Yeah.
They produce good quarterbacks from just having them just start out early and just get all of those reps. And man, I mean, he's just been putting up numbers these first few weeks.
Yeah, I didn't have any
UCLA as well. I think there's going to be at least one upset this weekend. I mean, we haven't picked any yet on this show, but there's going to be one.
I'm going UCLA. Screw it.
Yeah, screw it. Yeah, I like it.
We have a little fun on this show. Deep in the heart of Longhorn Sports Podcast. All right, 3 games to go. We have about 30 minutes here to work with before we really need to wrap this thing up. So we should be totally fine. Now we get to the night window. And we can come local here, as we're going to go Texas and Baylor. As we have in the title, the farewell FU tour starts tomorrow in the Big 12. And it starts in Waco with Texas's probably last game for the foreseeable future against Baylor. I have no doubt in my mind that Texas will not be traveling to Waco in a non-conference game for any reason whatsoever in the next 20, 25 years at least. You've watched this Texas team so far this year. It's a road test. You always get a little trepidation when Texas goes on the road, even though the past half year or so they've proven a little more to be up to these road tests. As last year they absolutely whooped Kansas. They beat Kansas State, a ranked Kansas State team at the time, a team that went on to win the Big 12 championship. They beat down Alabama. But there's still a little trepidation that enters the minds of Texas fans, even if they don't want to acknowledge it outright. It worries me a little, but I mean, this Baylor team hasn't been very good this year. They're starting their backup quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, who's completing 45% of his passes so far and has more touchdowns than more interceptions than touchdowns. Uh, their offensive line just it doesn't match up well with what Texas has up front with Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. Uh, you know, uh, Ethan Burke has been a fantastic player so far for Texas. They have Anthony Hill, who's that disruptive force that they've been using in pass rush situations and in run situations. Jalen Ford is a magnet to the football, whether it's in the run game or in the passing game. And this Texas secondary is just really, really good. I think they have NFL players all over this secondary. Ryan Watts is a guy that's going to be drafted after this year, prospectively. Terrence Brooks is a young guy who won't be eligible after this year, but he's been really good since late last year. Jahdae Barron is like just one of the better players overall on this team. And then Jaron Thompson has been a ball magnet so far this year. And that's not even to mention Malik Muhammad, Jalen Catalon, everybody else that's contributed on this Texas defense. And then offensively, I think it's about running the football first and foremost. You're getting CJ Baxter back, who didn't play last week because of an injury. That should be big. Jonathan Brooks, we saw him have the big game last week. In Sark's career at Texas, for whatever reason, and it has sort of become a thing in Texas Longhorn fanville, I guess you could say, or fanland. He struggled against the 3-3-5 defense, which is a very common defense that you see being played at the college football level, especially with teams that can't match up man for man. Like Baylor with their talent, all due respect to Baylor, great coach, Dave Aranda, love him. They play hard, they play physical, they play discipline most of the time. Good program, but the fact of the matter is, like, if they try to match up man for man against Texas, that's a losing battle for them.
Yeah.
10 times out of 10. So a lot of these teams that can't match up man for man most of the time will go to this defense called a 3-3-5. And you saw Wyoming do it last week. And Wyoming's not a team that traditionally plays the 3-3-5. But the reason they went to that defense is because they went and watched Sarkisian's offense at Texas. And historically, the teams that play this 3-3-5 style of defense have given this Texas offense lots and lots of trouble. We think back to the 2021 year when Texas went 5-7. I mean, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State all played that 3-3-5 defense. Gave Texas a lot of problems, especially in the passing game. Last year, they went against TCU, 3-3-5. Didn't do much of a whole lot in that game, obviously, as they only scored, I think, one touchdown in that game, and it wasn't an offensive touchdown. Remember that? Now, they did beat Kansas State last year, who played a 3-3-5 defense. And they also beat Iowa State last year, who played a 3-3-5 defense. But those weren't the prettiest games offensively from a Texas Longhorns perspective. Now, they did kind of break it open for a little bit last year against Kansas State. But that Iowa State game was, wasn't the prettiest game offensively. I was actually at that game. And until late, Texas really didn't do much offensively. It was more turnovers, creating short fields, hitting a couple big plays here and there through the run game. But the bottom line is, and after watching last week where Texas was held to 10 points up until, the fourth quarter, Sark has not been very good against this 3-3-5 defense. And for whatever reason, he struggled to adjust to it. The way you beat this defense, though, is you run the football. There are 6 in the box. Go to 12 personnel with Jatavion Sanders, Gunnar Helm, do whatever you have to do. Establish the run with CJ Baxter and Jonathan Brooks, who had his best career game at Texas last year on that big run that really broke open the game. Over 150 yards rushing. This Baylor team has not been good defending the run this year. So go to your run game early and let that open up the pass. These teams, especially in the Big 12, they're going to continue to go to this defense until Sark proves that he can adjust and, beat this defense. What a 3-3-5 defense requires a quarterback to do is he requires a quarterback to be accurate because you're throwing into more tight windows with 5 guys in the secondary. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. You're going to be throwing into more tight windows. And at times in his career, throughout his career, that's where Quinn Ewers has struggled with accuracy on a consistent basis. I mean, we even saw him miss throws in that Alabama game, and that was his best performance by far as a Texas quarterback. He still tends to miss some of these throws. And that's where that's the game you don't want to get yourself into, is a game where Baylor gets 1 or 2 interceptions, they create a short field, and you kind of let this backup quarterback in an offense that's struggling off the hook a little bit.
Yeah.
So, look, Texas should win this game. They probably should cover, but I'm not really worried about the spread all that much. Just get a win. Wins are wins at this point, especially at this point in the season. But run the football early, Sark. Like you have to. I know this offense wants to throw the football over the top with all the weapons that they have, and it's fun to do that. But you got to show Baylor that you're willing and able to run the football at this defense early on, so that they have to adjust and they don't just sit in this 3-3-5 defense where it's hard to throw the football over the top, which is what Texas wants to do. Yeah. Quinn Ewers has got to be accurate with the football, and I think he's got to settle into the game a little bit earlier than we've seen him settle into the game. It's been sort of a trend now where it's been kind of slow starts after slow start after slow start. Texas can't have that. I mean, technically they can recover from it, but you don't really want that, especially in a conference game like this. So, sorry I went on a little tangent there, but that's what I'm really looking for, is this 3-3-5 defense that Sark has historically struggled with for whatever reason against this Texas offense. Can this Texas offense promptly adjust to that?
Yeah, I want to see Texas get the lead early against this Baylor team, because this Baylor team just doesn't have the horses to make any type of comeback at all. So if Texas scores 30, it's a win. You can chalk it in. It's just whether or not you keep them in it with the mistakes, as you mentioned. I mean, if for whatever reason Baylor were to keep this close until the fourth quarter, it'll be because of what Texas is doing rather than what Baylor did.
Okay, so prize picks for this game. Longhorn specific prize picks. What do you have your eye on?
Yeah, it's interesting just because they don't have any Baylor players up. From what I've seen, I haven't seen any Baylor players. I did look at possibly Quinn Ewers under on interceptions. I think Texas is going to be leaning on their run game more. This is a better Texas offensive line than they've had in years. And with how much they've improved up front, Baylor can't play that 3-3-5 front in the same way. They're just going to run the football up down their throat the entire game. That's what I'm hoping for, and I think that's probably going to be my pick here, just from a Texas fan perspective. That's like a check mark for if Quinn Ewers doesn't turn the ball over, Texas wins this game.
Yeah, and that's been his sort of MO at Texas. I mean, aside from a couple ugly turnovers last year, he hasn't turned the ball over. He just doesn't do that. Now he does miss some throws that he should make, And I think even he would tell you that. And he hasn't been the most consistent player in the world, obviously, but he does not put the ball in harm's way very often. For me, I mean, they do have all four major Texas weapons up on Prize Picks. They have Xavier Worthy, they have Jordan Whittington, they have Jatavion Sanders, they have Adonai Mitchell, which I think he prefers to be called rather than AD Mitchell. I just have a weird feeling that, I mean, obviously, if you want to bet anything Xavier Worthy over, go ahead and do that. They love throwing him the ball, and he can create explosive plays. I wouldn't even argue with you if you put some money down on AD Mitchell over 48 and a half receiving yards. But I just have a feeling that this is going to be a Jordan Whittington game. For whatever reason, I just have a feeling that Texas is going to try to attack the middle of the field. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have some play action. Jordan Whittington, he's played in these games before. And I just feel like he's sort of like that safety outlet for Quinn Ewers. I think they'll find him on a couple chunk plays downfield. And I like him to have 4 or 5 receptions for probably 50 or 60 yards, maybe even a touchdown. But I like the over 43 and a half receiving yards for Jordan Whittington. I just have a gut feeling about that. And then I'd probably go Xavier Worthy over 0.5 touchdowns. I think he's going to get in the end zone. And then there was a rushing yards stat for Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah.
That I might consider actually taking the under on, just because he'll now go back to splitting carries with CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue. I'd probably lean under 84 and a half rush yards for Jonathan Brooks. So those were the 3 that I had my eye on.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. 2 more games, but we need to talk about this game for sure if we don't talk about anything else. It's the Ohio State Notre Dame game. Tomorrow, 6:30 Central on NBC. Start with you. What intrigues you about this game? What are you watching? I've heard a lot of people pick Notre Dame this week to win this game in South Bend, and what's a huge game already for both teams. The good thing for Ohio State is this isn't a conference game. So if they lose, it's not a conference game for either team, but it is a big game for that matter. Big rivalry. What are you looking for?
To me, this game is all about Kyle McCord. Can he get the ball spread out to those weapons that Ohio State has? I still think from a wide receivers versus that secondary standpoint, they have the edge there, and they're going to have the edge just against just about every team in the country. So that would be the first thing. It's going to be all about Kyle McCord and how he responds to playing in that environment. His first real big road game of his college football career, and then for Notre Dame, I think in terms of going against this Ohio State defense, you gotta stay on schedule in terms of getting to those short third downs. I like Sam Hartman. I love this running game. That offensive line is really, really good. But if you're able to stay on schedule on early downs, not only does that open up the playbook in terms of being able to call everything, but on a second and short, say, you can take your shots downfield as well. That opens up the door for those types of things. And that's really been the missing piece for this Notre Dame team. And that's why people are picking them to win this game. On top of it being in South Bend as well. I think it's a coin flip. At the end of the day, I'm leaning Ohio State just because I think the skill position talent is just superior from just Marvin Harrison Jr., Inyeka Abukum. I'm not sure how to say his name. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but yeah, I just think Ohio State will squeeze this one out somehow, some way.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a close game. This will be the best defense Kyle McCord has faced so far, obviously. Um, Notre Dame ranks second in passing success rate allowed. They're fifth in QBR allowed, and they're sixth in 3-and-out rate. So, I mean, I love this Notre Dame defense, and they are getting their linebacker duo back for this game. J.D. Bertrand, who I think will be an NFL player after this year. And there's one of their safeties, DJ Brown, is also returning from injury. So it'll be a healthier Notre Dame defense. Now, the one area I think you look for Ohio State to attack, we know about their weapons. We know about Emeka Ibuka. We know about Marvin Harrison. We know about, the other guy. I'm just blanking on his name right now. I'll think of it in a minute. But the one area that Notre Dame really hasn't been great yet is surprisingly in run defense. They're 58th in rushing success rate allowed, and they're 114th in stuff rate, which is a measure of run stops at or behind the line of scrimmage. So I think you look at TreVeyon Henderson to potentially maybe exploit that a little bit. I mean, you have the athletes up front on this offensive line. The one weakness for this Ohio State offense is the tackle spots. They lost both their starting tackles from last year to the draft. It hasn't been all that great right now. So how do you make up for that? You get the ball out fast in the passing game to these explosive playmakers, but you also, I guess, sort of mitigate their pass rush with a running game in between the tackles. Test Notre Dame's defensive front. I think it's a good defensive front, but test it early. Run TreVeyon Henderson between the tackles, and I bet you'll have some success there. You'll be able to take this crowd out of the game a little bit if you're able to run the ball successfully. And then, even though I think Notre Dame has got a good secondary, there are a lot of good secondaries that are going to go against this Ohio State offense this year and are just going to get outmatched. So I think you look at TreVeyon Henderson, you look at Mayan Williams, who both have combined so far for 132 rushing yards per game, about 6 yards per carry so far this year, to have a big impact on the ground. I think you're going to see Ohio State run the football, test this Notre Dame defense. But eventually, if Ohio State wants to win this game on the road in South Bend against a really good Notre Dame team with Sam Hartman, with some of the weapons that they have, with one of the more underrated backs in all of college football, and Audric Estime, and a good running game in itself, a great offensive line, what are they going to have to do? Well, Kyle McCord's going to have to make a couple of big throws if they want to win. And, I mean, whether or not he does that, that's up to you. That's up for you to decide. I wouldn't doubt that it happens. I think this Notre Dame offense is about as talented as it's been in the past half decade to a decade. I mean, Sam Hartman, NFL guy, probably not a first-round guy, but I could see him as like a day two type quarterback. Just a really experienced, really good starting quarterback in college football. And with this run game, it makes him even better. Really good Notre Dame offensive line with a couple draft picks on it and a top 5 pick at the tackle position potentially in Joe Alt. Love Audric Estime, who's actually a guy I was looking at in prize picks. A lot of the running backs that I was looking at in prize picks. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game than people think. I see it as sort of like a 23-20, 24-21, 27-24 type of game. I lean Ohio State still, but I won't be one bit surprised if Notre Dame ends up coming up big and winning this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. Um, I'm just betting on Ohio State turning the corner um, more so than maybe Notre Dame playing how they've been playing and dominating with that improved passing game. So we'll see what happens. I'm
Yeah,
not
and
really
the
sure.
last thing is this Ohio State defense is a really good unit.
Yeah.
They've allowed, I know it's been not the greatest of competition. I feel like we're going to have to say that all season long. It's just like a thing that people say now in college football. But against anybody, I don't care who you're playing, if you allow 20 total points in 3 games, you're a damn good defense. I mean, they've got NFL talent on that defense, and what that defensive coordinator has done, Jim Knowles, with that defense, it's been nothing short of spectacular. Ohio State is not a very good defense a couple of years ago, and they've just gotten better and better and better. So I do see it with both of these defenses and running games that I think could be effective on both sides of the ball. I do see it as sort of a lower scoring game, but hey, if we get a shootout, I'm always down for that. But either way, it's going to be close, and I think they've set this line perfectly. -3, I think it's pretty solid. So, any prize picks that you're looking at?
I think Marvin Harrison to score a touchdown, or really any type of bet that you would want to put on Marvin Harrison, I would take the over on. Really, I mean, that dude's just ridiculous. I don't think we've talked about him much this college football season, just because we haven't really talked much about Ohio State in general. But man,
Yeah, he's special.
yeah,
Just like his dad was. He's the same. Yeah, anything Marvin Harrison related, go ahead. I mean, don't hesitate whatsoever.
yeah,
I was looking more at the running backs though, because it's obviously I talked a lot about both running games, trying to find the exact numbers, but I lean probably towards uh, Audric Estime over. Yeah, I definitely lean Travion Henderson over 68.5 rushing yards easily. And I lean, where is Audric Estime? I saw him earlier, but now I'm not seeing him. But if I can find him,
74.5.
I'd lean over there too. Lean over both rushing yards for me at least. I think both teams will show a commitment to running the football. I haven't looked at the passing yard statistics for either of these quarterbacks, but I'd probably stay away from passing yards altogether. Just don't love that.
Yeah.
Pass rushing yards, let's see. Rush and receiving touchdowns, no, nothing there. Is there any fantasy score for either of these players? Let's see. Not seeing it.
Yeah, the selection is a little bit more limited for college football.
Yeah.
The one I always like for NFL is pass attempts or pass completions. Because
Yeah.
if you have a feel for game script and like one team being down, they're gonna throw the football a lot. So
Yeah, maybe you go Marvin Harrison over 6 receptions if you think he'll get that much, or even Emeka Egbuka over 5.5. I also like Jaden Thomas, one of the receivers for Notre Dame, 3.5. That feels kind of low to me. If you wanted to go a Notre Dame offensive skill player bet, that seems like a pretty good one. But yeah, I mean, there's more to explore, but those were the main ones. Especially the running backs, I'm probably going to put them in some sort of power play or flex play. What do they call it on Prize Picks? I'm pretty new to Prize Picks, so I'm still getting the hang of it. Okay, let's just make a quick pick for the Penn State Iowa game, and then we'll get out of here since we're already at an hour 15 minutes. We don't have to do any sort of deep breakdown, but Do you think Penn State will win this game and cover, or are you thinking more of a close game? Iowa keeps it relatively close and challenges Penn State. And what is their whiteout game?
Yeah, I think the line is right about what I would put it at. I think it's correct. I think Iowa. It just depends on if they're able to run the football. That's really what it comes down to me, because they want to play that ball control offense, and kind of control time of possession and just control how much Drew Aller and that Penn State offense goes onto the field. But I think they'll hang around 10 points most of the game. Whether or not they get maybe a late touchdown and cover or not, I think it's kind of a toss up. But I do see Penn State winning this game. If you watched our dit hole that we had with a guest a few days ago, I went on the record saying I'm very high on Penn State.
Yeah, I love watching Drew Aller. I want to see Nicholas Singleton get going a little more here in this game. I think that's one of the better backfields in college football. But look, I like what Iowa's done with the former Michigan quarterback, Cade McNamara, and that offense. It has gotten better. Obviously, they have a good defense, but I just think Penn State this year, there's something different to that team in Happy Valley and that environment. I think they'll find a way to get their run game going, and they'll create some explosive plays. And I love that Penn State defense. I think that defense is a really good unit. I don't know if they cover 14.5. That feels kind of high to me in a game like this against a really good team and a good program, good defense in Iowa. But maybe they make a statement. Right now, I'd probably take Penn State to win by 10 or 12 points. But, hey, we'll see what happens. That is the 6:30 game on CBS after Bama and Ole Miss. So it's a loaded day of college football, and we didn't even talk about Oregon State and Washington State.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about an interesting game in Texas A&M and Auburn. There are other games too. Oklahoma, a tough road test at Cincinnati.
LSU, Arkansas.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. So I'm getting kind of tired talking because we did a 55-minute show before this where we talked about our Ryder Cup. Our Ryder Cup draft pick. So go check that out. And I just felt the obligation. We won't do this every week where we go through every single game, but I felt the obligation this week in particular to do it because, we don't get this very often.
Yeah, this week is different.
But we will be going through 2 or 3 games every week, including the Texas game, so that we can talk about our prize picks in particular. Or I can talk about my prize picks. Maybe Emmy will be on some of those. Maybe I'll give you the week off next week. But maybe you come back for Red River week. I think that would be a good plan.
Yeah, definitely will be.
So hopefully Texas and Oklahoma are undefeated. I actually can't believe I'm about to say this. I want Oklahoma to be undefeated when Texas faces them at Red River. I don't know. I know Oklahoma plays at Cincinnati tomorrow. That may or may not be easy. Oklahoma has looked pretty good so far this year. And I'm not sure who they play next week. I know Texas gets Kansas in DKR before Red River. But I do want Oklahoma to be top 15 ranked, undefeated type team when Texas plays them in Red River, because I don't see Texas having a ton of opportunities for those marquee wins.
Yeah.
The rest of their Big 12 schedule. So, but we'll talk more about that next week. I'm looking at probably 2 shows here on Dit Hole. One probably around Tuesday. It might be a big recruiting weekend for the Horns, so it might get a couple big commitments this weekend. We know they're going to get one. We just don't know if they're going to get more than that. So I'll be talking about that. I'm going to start my college basketball stuff as well on Monday. You'll want to tune into that. What I'm going to do, just random generate. Top 30, 35 teams in the country, spin a wheel. Whichever 2 teams I get, those are the teams I'm talking about on that particular day. So tune into that. And then I'll have some Texas talk, recap of the Baylor game if I need to, and some other things as well. Maybe some buy or sell. I might have another guest on that show. And then next Thursday or Friday, we'll be breaking down a couple of the games and giving some prize picks. I know USC plays Colorado next week in Boulder, so that's exciting. Texas plays Kansas. There are a couple other games I had my eye on, so we'll be doing that. And then Emmy and I will be live Sunday night after Sunday Night Football for our NFL recap and the Raw Rundown. And then we'll have one baseball episode next week before we take a little bit of a hiatus next weekend before we're back for Red River Week. So lots of good stuff coming on the Raw Prospect Podcast football channel. Maybe even some live streams in the near future for baseball playoffs and football games. So that should be fun. But with all that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Do you have any parting shots? Any
parting shot? I don't know if you heard that sound right there, but I may have just cracked my phone. That's my parting shot.
That's not good.
No, we're all good. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, good thing he did not crack his phone. So just like the chances of Emmy cracking his phone, and just like the chances of Baylor beating Texas, yes, I'm doubling down on that. We are going, gone. Peace out and hook 'em horns.
Yep.